What's going on, everybody? Crypto Headquarters here, and in today's video we're going to be talking about some absolutely monumental news that is the upcoming decision from the SEC and the CFTC in regards to classifying Ethereum among other cryptocurrencies as securities. So we're going to be talking about all of that and more throughout the video, why this is big news and what this means for the future of Ethereum. So while this may not be the most flashiest topic in terms of what we're going to be covering today, keep in mind this is huge news, and I'm going to be explaining why and what this means for the future of Ethereum and the precedent that it's going to set for other cryptocurrencies as well. So with all that said, I'm going to jump into the disclaimer, which states none of the information in today's video is investment or financial advice. This is just simply my personal opinion. Please do your own research before investing. Invest at your own risk. Don't invest more than you can afford to lose. Consult a financial advisor if necessary. As for transparency purposes, I am not invested into and I do not hold Ethereum in my portfolio at the time of making this video. So with all of that said, let's jump into it. The main article that I'm going to be using in today's video can be found over on finder.com.au and will be linked in the description down below as always. So the title of today's article is Ethereum, almost zero chance of the SEC declaring it a security. And I understand that title in and of itself might not inspire a ton of emotion or even seem like some groundbreaking news within the space, and many of you guys have probably not even heard of this news unless you're super in depth to the cryptocurrency community and the cryptocurrency news. So in this video, I'm going to be doing my best to explain why this matters. So Ethereum's judgment day is coming on May 7th, and it's almost certainly going to go Ethereum's way. So what's happening on May 7th? Well, on May 7th, senior SEC and CFTC officials will be discussing whether or not Ethereum is a security. So what is a security and why does this matter? So the actual definition of a security is several pages long, and there's no practical reason to go over that in this video, but in general it refers to something sold as a speculative investment or to pay dividends through its operation where the future value of that investment depends on someone else to put in the work. So you may be thinking to yourself, this sounds like a lot of tokens, this sounds like a lot of cryptocurrencies, and you would be correct in some aspects. So most or all ICOs, for example, can be categorized as securities in the USA by this definition. So you are right in that regard. If you thought that, the market reacted very strongly to the SEC's initial announcement that it would be cracking down on cryptocurrency securities and exchanges. So we've known for a while that regulation is on the horizon. We've seen the SEC come out and say that they are not banning cryptocurrency in the United States, and that was positive news. There we saw a Senate hearing a few months back that we covered on this channel, and overall we found out that regulation is coming. There's no exact date to this, and finally now we're kind of getting some concrete dates and news coming out on May 7th, especially for Ethereum. And while regulation has been on the horizon, we know it's inevitable and it's coming. There has been a lot of positive news regarding it, and it's not been as detrimental as some people have thought. So while ICOs, for example, can be categorized as securities, Ethereum fits a different mold. So even though those discussions were largely centered around ICOs, this latest volley is focused around Ethereum. If it's deemed to be a security, what would happen is most cryptocurrency exchanges would be forced to cease trading it in the USA except when appropriately registered and to accredited investors. Now, what would happen if it was deemed a security? So as I mentioned, exchanges, so Binance, Bittrex, Bitfinex, Coinbase, your favorite exchanges out there would have to get registered and comply with SEC regulation. Exchanges want nothing to do with regulation. They don't want any part of that. And at the end of the day, it's going to cause a lot more friction. It's going to be harder for the end user, traders, investors to obtain Ethereum, as there's going to be a ton of hoops for exchanges to go through if it's actually listed as a security. So that would not be an ideal situation. Now, it would mean that most cryptocurrency exchanges would be forced to cease trading it until they got appropriately registered and appropriately registered by the SEC and could trade it to accredited investors. So that would be the lesser, the situation that we don't want to see moving forward here. However, unlikely, but it could happen. Now, there's a strong case that one or both of Ethereum and XRP are non-compliant securities, said former CFTC chairman, and its 2014 token sale, he points out, could have been classified as an illegal security sale. However, we're going to get into that, why that point doesn't matter. However, he does admit that there's no legal precedent for it, and the only clear consensus among experts and regulators seems to be that it's a gray area without any clear answer. So there's been no situation like this in the past. There's been no decentralized currency. There's been no cryptocurrency that's been declared a security in the past. So this is a gray area. This is uncharted waters for the SEC, and they want to make sure that they tread carefully moving forward here. So there's almost certainly nothing to worry about. The odds of Ethereum being declared a security on May 7th are slim to none. but I'm going to be showing you why this is true. So they mentioned that the only argument for Ethereum being a security is that it was initially sold as a speculative asset without proper registration and purchased by people as such. Other than that, that's the only arguments against it. So what they're saying here is that they think that Ethereum, in its most early of stages, it was sold as a speculative asset without the appropriate registration. However, this isn't a very strong argument against Ethereum because, one, it's highly unlikely they're going to go back 3 to 4 years and impose these burdens on Ethereum. It would be unusual for a regulator to go back in time and say, you should have thought that 3 or 4 years ago when you started that this was a security. That would be ridiculous, one. And two, to single out 1 or 2 cryptocurrencies because of the way they were formed would be picking winners and losers in the marketplace, certainly something the SEC would not be doing. So on the front end of this, you have the fact that it would be ridiculous for the SEC to go back and say, hey, Ethereum, the project, the community, whoever was behind it, and we're going to get into why that's an issue in and of itself later, you guys should have thought about this 3 years ago when it's formed and was a security, and if they were to do that, the SEC would literally be picking winners and losers within the cryptocurrency space based upon how they were formed, and they don't want to get into that business. Additionally, it would make shambles of U.S. innovation policy, and additionally, if we go on here, it would be an intensive uphill legal battle to declare it a security. The reason is because it would be a resource-intensive battle that the SEC probably has no interest in pursuing due to the fact that the deck is strongly and already stacked against Ethereum, and the SEC doesn't have the resources, the time, or money, and even if they did, it wouldn't be a battle worth pursuing. So we already have a few good points to the fact that Ethereum is going to continue moving the way that it is, and it's going to continue to be traded on exchanges, or at least the deck is stacked for Ethereum. Now, many people have brought up the argument that Ethereum is a purely speculative asset, and this doesn't have a lot of weight behind it. And the reason is because these days, Ethereum has a range of practical applications and has blossomed to the second biggest cryptocurrency in the world in terms of market cap. And with that, it makes it extremely difficult to argue that it's a purely speculative asset due to the fact that it is one of the most widely adopted cryptocurrencies and blockchain projects. And there is so many different practical applications, ICOs, things built on top of Ethereum that would just mark it as purely speculative. Additionally, it would also be difficult to confidently argue that people buying Ethereum in the initial sale were doing so for investment purposes rather than because they wanted to use the systems themselves. So in today's cryptocurrency space, the way that the market is now, obviously a ton of people are interested in ICOs as they want to strike it rich. They want to get in on the ground floor. They want to get tokens at the cheapest price possible in a project that they believe in. But back when Ethereum was founded, it's going to be very hard to argue that this is the same landscape back then than we are seeing now. People most likely invested into Ethereum back then to actually use the system and the Ethereum platform themselves, as it was a different time. Now, there were definitely people who bought and traded Ethereum in order to view it as a speculative asset, in order to hope that Ethereum obviously would increase in price and do well over the future. However, it's going to be very hard to argue that people in the beginning were doing so for investment purposes. So while that's certainly changed over time, there's just so many things going against Ethereum being labeled as a security. Additionally, it would open up some can of worms in other ways that we haven't mentioned thus far. The Ethereum token sale took in Bitcoin, which wasn't widely regarded as money in 2014. Keep in mind, guys, we've come a long ways in 4 years, and in 2014, Bitcoin wasn't even really considered money. So were investors at this time really spending money, or is it more like swapping digital baseball cards? Could they technically even be called investors if they were spending Bitcoin? Yes, times have changed, but if we look when Ethereum was founded, this was definitely the case. So, plus, Ethereum is just a decentralized piece of software. It doesn't have a street address or an official representative, which makes it awfully hard to send threatening legal letters. There's the Ethereum Foundation, but they're more like a team of volunteer programmers willingly giving up their spare time to work on the Ethereum platform. So I mentioned that we would get to this later in the video, and now we're at it. Who are you going to send these threatening legal letters to? You're going to send them to Vitalik? Or are you going to send it to the Ethereum Foundation? What are you going to do? And obviously, you can regulate the exchanges that are trading Ethereum, but at this point in time, it doesn't look like Ethereum is going to be labeled a security, and honestly, this is probably the best outcome that we could potentially see. So even if, and it's an unrealistically big if, Ethereum was quickly and unanimously declared a security, the only result would be that certain US exchanges could no longer sell the token to the general public. And while that doesn't sound awful, and while that certainly isn't the worst thing that could happen to Ethereum or cryptocurrency, It certainly isn't ideal. Obviously, there would be a lot of mistrust in the marketplace. There are be a lot of people panic selling Ethereum. There are a lot of people freaking out, and it could potentially send the market into a bit of a bear market as we tried to climb out of that in the past few months. And certainly, this bit of news, I don't know how this would specifically impact the market. I just think that if this, and even though it's an unrealistically big if Ethereum was to be labeled a security, it would not only hurt the Ethereum cryptocurrency's volume would plummet, and mostly almost every single exchange, I don't think there is any exchanges registered with the SEC right now compliant to sell securities. Nobody will be able to trade Ethereum, at least in the United States, and it would just not do well for cryptocurrency as a whole. So it's good to see that the deck is stacked firmly against Ethereum being labeled as security, and it's going to be interesting to see how we progress as a community and we progress as a space within cryptocurrency and blockchain projects in the future, and what regulation is on the horizon and how this is going to impact the market. So again, this is just an example of keeping up to date with the information surrounding your favorite projects, whether or not you are keeping up with Ethereum or you even care what Ethereum is. It's always good to keep up with this information because news like this, we've seen it in the past. The SEC's announcement regarding ICOs took the market into a downward spiral, at least for that short amount of time. And the same if Ethereum was actually to be declared a security and they were able to crack down on it immediately after that, it would cause the market to spiral downward. And a lot of people, though whether or not we recover from that quickly or not, a lot of people to lose trust in Ethereum and just be uncertain about the future. So while it's not necessarily Ethereum's fault to be labeled as security, it would unfortunately be an unfortunate situation. So I'm going to cut to the outro of the video, and hopefully you learned something in today's video. That's going to do it for the video today, guys. Thank you guys so much for watching. Make sure to hit that like and subscribe button. Your guys' support has been amazing. Again, hopefully it's always my intent that you guys learn something from the video. And with that said, I'm going to jump into the disclaimer, which states none of the information in today's video is investment or financial advice. This is just simply my personal opinion. Please do your own research before investing. Invest at your own risk. Don't invest more than you can afford to lose, and consult a financial advisor if necessary. Again, thank you guys so much for watching. For transparency purposes, I'm not invested into and don't hold Ethereum in my portfolio at the time making this video. So with all that said, thank you guys again so much for watching, and have a great rest of your day.